Friends, it's 11 o'clock, and as usual, we'll start at the right time. People will keep on joining. So, friends, welcome to the weekly Saturday knowledge sharing webinar organized by Mehta and Mehta. And our today's topic is an insight into risk management committee. And today's our presenter is Miss Nayan Handa. Nayan is leading our Delhi office, and she is also CS, and she has given presentation several times, holding vast experience on compliance and other field, and FEMA and due diligence and various other fields. We have with us our today's panelist, Mr. Jambunathan Malik. Mr. Jambunathan Malik is, I will say, our proud participants, regular participants. And today, he is our panelist, very knowledgeable person. Mr. Jambunathan Malik is a seasoned business leader with over 4 decades of diversified industrial experience, covering the cement, pharmaceuticals, auto components, water and wastewater treatment, and oil and gas sectors. A chartered accountant and company secretary, he also holds a bachelor's degree in general law and is an alumnus of IMD Lasun. He has spent more than 20 years in senior international leadership roles across India, the Middle East, Europe, the USA, and APAC, including serving as Managing Director Singapore SEA for leading Swiss multinational. His expertise spans general management, finance, HR, legal, risk, governance, ethics, merger and amalgamation, restructuring, strategy, and business development. Mr. Malik has served on the boards of subsidiaries in India, Singapore, Korea, Thailand, UK, and Romania, and has held key executive roles, including CFO and company secretary in listed and private companies. He is also a startup mentor, guiding founders in building and scaling successful ventures. He spent 14 years as a director at Sulzer India, contributing significantly to its growth and strategic direction. Welcome, Mr. Malik. Thanks a lot for your time. And today
Thank,
we'll get knowledge of your benefit of your experience in a different management level. Thank you, Mr. Malik.
thank you so much. It's a privilege, and at least being a participant, you learn how you. I remember some middle of 2023 it started, so I've been there from the beginning. So I leave it to the eminent Professor Sir and Sudhakarji to kick off the topic as you do normally, and then probably I can say a few words on the topic as you go. I hand over.
Thank you. Friends, our other panelist, Mr. Sudhakar, need no introduction, and he is already getting his appreciation from participant. And Mr. Bala, same way, no introduction. He is also getting appreciation. So thanks a lot. I'll request Mr. Jambunathan Malik to say a few words on the topic, then Sudhakar and Bala, and then you can start your presentation and start sharing the screen. Thank you. Over to Mr.
Okay.
Jambunathan.
Yeah. So good morning, friends and fellow professionals. What I share is going to be n- more from a practical experience for a person who started probably in the late 80s, and where we were allowed to be a combo role of a finance head and also secretarial head, So, and later on, I moved from a listed company to, then I moved away from India in an oil and gas company where we do supply equipment to big refineries. So, and by virtue of being taking roles away from your domain, I led HR globally. I've done risk. I was the risk person from that business unit, and then moved to business development in the last stage. So I was the Asia Pacific, Australia. And so why I say this is don't get this thing to only secretarial activity or legal. So look for also some chair beyond your area and learn from them. This is, and the topic also, the risk topic has to know more about understanding the business. Okay. So what I'll just quickly start with this. I know most of you have heard about GRC. Now, GRC is the basic premise. Governance, risk, and then compliance. Now, governance is principle and control that guide an organization's behavior to meet its goal. Okay. Whereas risk is the process of identifying threats and creating system to protect against them. So that is what we are going to today deal with it. And compliance, which with you are all expert, is about ensuring that the organization follows the relevant regulation, the laws, the SOPs, and conduct with ethical practices. So this GRC is very important because if you go to any internal control or risk fellow, you will talk about GRC controls in SAP environment and things like that. Okay. So this is just to start with. Now, risk management, I think she will be able to give a presentation. I don't want to get too much into it, but just want to tell you that risk management also evolved over a period. It started from a very intuitive survival based practices in ancient times to today a formal systematic data driven discipline. Okay. So we also moved from a kind of a reactive approach focused on insurable risk to a proactive holistic framework today. Okay. And that is the reason. So if you really go back, if some of you are interested in origin and history, risk management came somewhere in 1920s, I believe, and then emerged a little bit formal in 50s. In 80s, it was about insurance and, kind of finance. And only in 90s, the enterprise risk management came in. And thereafter, there has been no stopping. So if you really see, SEBI has positioned risk management committee as a board instrument to shape risk culture, set risk appetite, and oversee resilience. So what we are going to see today is how we holistically integrate risk with our strategic business. How do we risk management can help to focus on resilience and value creation. And today technology is the key. How leveraging technology can be a gate, this thing for the oversight of RMC and board to see what is there, especially cyber security. What happens in cyber security? What patches have been done? How do you, as a secretarial in your documents, can show the dashboard to see, is it something that is good for the RMC or not? And addressing new risk is also a goal of today. What is new risk? Geopolitical,
Right.
very big. That's why, then it's also about trade controls. It's also about ESG. So we will try to cover a little bit, but all this is about cultural shift. It has to be supported strongly from the top with
Right.
strong governance, leadership, and culture. I think with this, I leave it to the experts to take it, and then as and when the topic of technical gets into it, I will get my sharing. Thank you,
Thank
thank you,
you. Thank you, Mr. Jambuna.
thanks to
Oh,
Deepthi, you, to Professor Bala Sahab, Sudhakar Sahab, and also the excellent participants who wait at 9:50 to get into this Saturday
Thank
means
you.
morning we have to attend M&M, so that's the, and it's also the yeoman service of Bala and Sudhakar Sahab. See, they don't close their shirt. They open up their knowledge to give it to us, and that is what the professionals have to come to take it to with them. Thank you.
Thank you. It's really useful, and I think the way you presented, we are sure that we are going to have exciting knowledge sharing experience from you. Very aptly, you mentioned what is the importance of risk management committee and how crucial it is for the company and the board to consider it. Thank you. Over to Sudhakar, please.
good morning, everyone. Mr. Malik has already mentioned about the big buzzwords like your enterprise risk management, your GRC, geopolitical risk, etc., etc. So what I'm left with is only the fundamentals of the risk. What is exactly the risk? So I will talk about the fundamentals because he has already touched the sky. So let me touch the earth first. So risk is an inherent in every human life. To understand the risk, and we before our playing as a role as a company secretary, sometimes we have to have the clarity about the risk. The way we need to have the stress is also two ways: positive stress and negative stress. We have to imbibe the positive stress for the progress and prosperity, and we have to avoid the negative stress. Similarly, in life also, at every stage we have risk. Not only in the corporate life, even in the personal life also we have the risk. It is inherent. So it is inevitable. We cannot avoid the risk. The only thing what we need to do is we have to take a calculated risk. If you are risk averse, you will can never be able to progress or prosper. So risk is to be accepted. Only thing is that the risk is to be measured, the risk is to be mitigated. And the if you are risk averse, then you will never be able to do anything. Sometimes it so happens that if anybody says, I have no stress, that itself may be a stress. Similarly, somebody says that I have no risk at all, that itself is a risk. You are not able to identify the risk attached to you. In fact, sometimes success is a risk. I again remember that a few years before, Mukesh Bhai has mentioned in one of the board meetings of RIL, the company was performing excellently year after year. All the entire board was happy and they were congratulating the chairman. And they say that, RIL now has reached the pinnacle. You see the words of Mr. Mukesh Ambani, he said immediately that itself is my worry. People were surprised. Everyone was surprised in the boardroom because your success year after year, and he says that is his worry. Then he has been asked why you are worried about your success. He said that, look, when you are going to have this kind of a feeling, if it is there in the room, it may lead to complacency. That is going to be a risk. So even if we are gaining success year after year also, whether it is corporate or in personal life, we need to challenge from time to time. We have to have high aspirational goals, both in corporate as well as in private also again. Unless until we do that, we will not be able to progress and prosper. Risk is always what's called as comes with that opportunities. In every risk, you have an opportunity. What we have to do is that the moment some opportunity comes, most of the times it happens that we are worried about the risk and we are not seeing the hidden opportunity in that. So most of the corporates also, especially the corporates like Reliance, if you see in Reliance, at every stage it has a risk and it has surpassed that every time. When I worked for almost 17, 18 years with Reliance, at least wherever my domain, this thing is there, I could see that the amount of risks what we used to face. And the way RIL as a team used to surpass under the leadership of Mr. Mukesh Ambani is really, I mean, what's called as, to get a party into that is really what's called as an opportunistic movement in everybody's life. Same is the case with everywhere. Say, even if suppose you are in practice as a company secretary and you are running your own firm, attached to that, so many risks are there. So, as far as the corporate is concerned, several times we always work for that. We have the risk management committee and we have the risk profile is there and all the dashboard, this, that, whatnot, and all. But several times we ignore the risk attached to our personal lives. I take this opportunity at least, okay, that from time to time, we also have to, at a personal level, we have to see that what sort of risks I am having it, how to mitigate that risk. According to me, the most fundamental risk for a professional, time and again, I used to say that the kind of the kind of evolution what is happening in in the regulations and whether it is companies act or listing regulations or anything else, the amount of evolution takes place unless until you keep the pace with that, the redundancy risk is going to be there as a professional. Unless until you keep the pace with that and this risk is mitigated, very soon it will be that you will, I mean, we all may become redundant professionals. So I give a pause here and then request Bala to take it further. And when Nayan makes her presentation, we'll pitch in wherever it is required. Thank you very much.
Good morning to all of you. I have a great pleasure in welcoming you all for this knowledge sharing session every Saturday, which has been conducted by Mehta and Mehta. And after hearing from both the stalwarts, I have nothing to say except risk, as Sudhakar puts it, is there everywhere. But the only thing is, rather than eliminating the risk, it is only the controlling the risk appropriately. That is what the very important thing which comes into the picture. In fact, people might have been talking about going beyond the regulations. I was actually working in a company which was actually a chemical company. They were using the hazardous material like, methyl isocyanate, phenol formaldehyde, formalin, all this sort of a thing. They were actually using it way back in 2000. But the company wanted to expand in manufacturing some of the manufacturing things. The very first question which has been asked is, by using material, what is the operational risk is involved? How we are going to handle? How the safety health of the people are affected? What is the thing? How can we handle this? How can we go without the human touch, without causing the thing? That was actually the concern. In fact, those days, I think this LODR regulation was not there. Companies Act was also not there. It was 1956 Act. So since the company was the parent company from UK, we actually picked up from the GCC guidance of management of the risk for the practitioner. I think it was TSO 2002, technical standing orders, which we picked up. But also we have gone through the combined code of the UK that time, which came in the year 2000, where the Turnbull Committee has published his report about the risk, about the management rules, etc. We formulated the strategic risk management policy. What I remember as a company secretary role, all the risk owners, whoever is responsible in the particular area, they are not going to be present in the board meeting. They are actually giving the report which is consolidated, which is given. It was rather the big job for me to sit them, understand the thing. Wherever I had doubt, I used to tell them, wait outside the committee meeting room. Whenever I need, I will call you. You will have to actually present. I may not be able to explain this. Those sort of things we used to have. Now today, Mallikarjun has been talking about taking the help of the technology, which is going in a very big way. But those days, we did not have this sort of the technology. Virtually, it was for me to maintain the risk register, identifying the risk, what is the impact, what is the worst scenario, what is the best scenario, what can go wrong. All those things we have to present this. It was a marathon job for us, actually. As Mallikarjun put it, it is the company secretaries have to take a lead. Because one thing is there, company secretary is the only person who's going to be present in throughout the board meeting and the committee meeting, right from the beginning till the end, understanding the business, and he has to give and the board look upon the company secretaries, the necessary information, adequacy, and other things like that. We have a great role to play, actually. Beyond that, I won't say anything. And since Nayan is going to make a presentation, and Mallikarjun with his global experiences, himself handle the various risk management areas, I think he will actually give us the more personal experiences and we will learn more. That is the thing. I stop here. I'll ask Nayan to take forward. Over to Nayan, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Bala. You rightly mentioned what is the CS role. Very nicely mentioned, because we are present, we coordinate with chairman, we draft the agenda, we should know, and we should direct the meeting and the board and also the committee. Over to Nayan. You can start your presentation.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. Thank you, everyone. So, as you know, everyone has given their own definition of risk and given a good explanation. So, let me start what we have researched on the risk. So, uh, risk comes from the very early Italian word that is called risicere, which means to dare. And I really like this meaning because it captures the essence of risk in the business world. So, risk is not just about the danger or the negative outcome, it is about taking the bold steps, moving forward despite the unknowns. So, and daring to create something bigger. So, every business decision, whether it is entering a new market, launching a new product, or having investing in people, technology, it involves a lot of daring to get into it, and this is what makes the concept of risk is so powerful. So today's business environment is extremely dynamic and everything around us changing very quickly, and market trends, technology, regulations, customer expectations, digital threat, even the environment conditions are getting changing rapidly. Because of this, the risk landscape that companies are facing today is more complex than before. So, as Jack Zehran, the president of Pinkerton, explained that this beautifully when he said that the only way for company to survive in such a fast-paced environment is to have a dynamic and holistic approach to the risk management. And I completely agree with that. So now what exactly the risk is as per the Oxford Dictionary, it is defined as the exposure to the possibility or a loss of someone, some unwelcome situation. So, but in a corporate context, risk means much more than that. Risk is anything that can stop an organization from achieving its goal, and it could be financial uncertainty, anything operational error, a compliance violation, any cyber attack, or even something as simple as reputational issue on the social media. So risk is not limited to nowadays it is not limited to fires, flood, earthquake, or any natural disaster anymore. So it is also include the digital fraud, data breaches, environment challenges, and climate related event like technology disruption, sudden regulatory changes. Also every organization, whether it is big or small, they have to deal with the risk every single day. And in the article of Professor Bala, it has given the explanation in his article that strategic risk management is means uncertainty or deviation from expected outcomes. So it is not only financial risk, but also business, operational, regulatory, and IT and reputational risk that arises from the constantly changing environment. This is very important that a risk is not always negative. As Sudhakar sir mentioned, if a company wants to grow anyone or create long term value, it has to take risk. Just like we cannot avoid stress in life, we cannot avoid risk in business as well. So we can learn to manage it in a very mature, structured, and intelligent way. So when risk is ignored or underestimated, it turns into the crisis. So, but when it is identified early and managed well, it become a competitive advantage also. Now let's talk about what is risk management means. So risk management refers to the entire process through which an organization identifies, understand, access and manage the risk that could impact the business. So this simple purpose of risk management is to increase the chance of success and reduce the chance of failure. So effective risk management not only protect a company from losses, but also strengthen the confidence among the shareholders, employee, customers, and the society. So it signals that a company is being run very responsibility. And risk management is not such a separate activity that a company has to do. It requires a very deep understanding of the organization, its people, its process, its culture, its environment, even the vulnerability. So when risk management is done well, it works like a early warning system and it alerts the organization before something goes wrong, so that corrective steps can be taken on time. Earlier the risk management was focused mainly on preventing the physical damage, but the nature has changed today, and rapid technology changes, global business operations, and higher expectations around the ESG, that environment, social and governance factors, they have introduced a new type of risk. So this risk cannot be managed with the old method. So this is why this modern risk management has become a very strategic tool now, and it helps organization to protect their asset, reduce the uncertainty, support business continuity, and remain sustainable in the long run. So the message I want to leave here is that risk is everywhere, risk is constant, and risk is unavoidable. But if we understand it, analyze it, and manage it very wisely, it becomes our strength rather than our weakness. So the risk comes from risky care to dare. So, but we must dare with awareness and the preparation. So now, that we have covered what exactly the risk is, and let me move to the next part. That is the type of risk that organizations face today. So risk is not one dimensional; it comes from many directions, and that's why companies classify risk into the two categories so that they can be understood and managed better. So broadly, I have divided the risk into the two parts, that is financial risk and non-financial risk. So financial risk are those which directly affect the money, asset, or financial stability of an organization. So these risks can impact the profitability, liquidity, cash flow, valuation, and even the survival of the business. So these losses can occur when debt and investments are not managed wisely. So, due to the unfortunate financial decisions or some market conditions. So, there may be in a financial risk, there is market risk. Market risk is also known as the risk of financial loss. As a result of movement in the market prices, example, stock prices, commodity prices, interest rate, foreign exchange rate, and when the market hits the opposite direction of the position takes by the company, then it becomes the loss or it gains, which result in the bearing a negative financial impact. So this regulation is applicable on the companies. So sorry, this is applicable on the companies either investing or trading financial assets. So another type of risk is liquidity risk, which means the company might not have sufficient cash which needed. And even if the business looks profitable on paper, this is very common in NBFCs and real estate companies.
Nayan, here again, when you say the liquidity risk, whenever the company wants to declare the dividend, within 5 working days, the money has to be virtually transferred to the bank account. So before declaring the dividend, the company secretary has to run with a check sitting with the CFO, whether the money is actually there, it is kept in the kitty, so that this compliance is there. Again, coming to the compliance risk. You well said correctly. Yeah.
They all are interrelated, yeah. So, and then we can talk about the credit risk. It arises when a borrower or a consumer do not repay the loan or credit on schedule. So when it happens, it cause loss of money for the lenders or the enterprises. So this risk is present for bank and lenders and company where they extend the credit to the businesses on and the higher the credit risk, the higher the risk of no payment. So it occurs when a borrower or customers fail to pay. For example, like credit risk is the largest risk category, and a rise in NPA is a classic example we can give in the credit risk. And there comes the operational risk. It is when internal processes fail, and like a technical glitch, there is a human error, the system failure, or a fraud. So, operational risk is the risk of losses caused by a flawed or the failed processes, systems, policies, even that rest of the business operations. And employee error, criminal activity, fraud. So these are the factors that trigger the operational risk. And most of the organization accept that their people and processes will inherently incur the errors and contribute to the ineffective operation. So in evaluating the operational risk, practical remedial steps should be taken and to eliminate those exposures and ensure the successful responses should be there. And if left unaddressed, so the increase of the incurrence of operational risk can cause monetary loss, competitive disadvantage, or employee or customer related problems, and it can lead to the business failure as well. So the challenges like witness and mitigating the operational risk are like the data required is not readily available, the operational complexity is growing in enterprises, the universe of operational risk types expand, and operational risk overstep with other risk functions feel threatened by what seems like duplicate risk function. So these are certain things which to be mitigate operational risk to mitigate the operational risk. So legal risk arises when company is exposed to the lawsuits, non-compliance, or the penalties. So, and the country risk is the potential for losses or the negative impact or investment in a foreign country due to the political or economical or social factors. And a good recent example of a country risk is what happened in the US, like where they revised the tariff rates on certain imported goods. So this move, had a ripple effect across the global supply chains and directly impacted the several Indian industries. So including the steel manufacturing and electronics. So many Indian exporters suddenly found their product becoming less competitive, and this shows how a regulatory change in one country can immediately influence another country's economy and business environment. So these financial risks are usually measurable in numbers, so which is why finance team has to monitor this risk very, very closely. Then comes the non-financial risk, which are the ones that actually create a biggest damage to the company. And these risks may not always appear in financial statement immediately, but they hit the organization much harder than the long run. First is like business or industry risk, which includes anything happen in the industry that can affect your company, such as there is a new competitor in the market, disruptive technology, there is changing customer preferences, and any other new government rules. Then strategic risk is which, the company itself is wrong or outdated. If company enters a market without a proper research and makes an acquisition that does not even align with its goal, it faces the strategic risk. Then comes the compliance risk. When the company fails to comply with the law and regulation standards like SEBI, MCA, RBI, GST, and environmental regulations, become tighter. And this compliance risk has become a very serious area. And one of the most modern risk is reputation risk. A single negative news article, an employee incident, or a social media post that can damage the brand value instantly. And the reputation takes years to build, and it takes very few seconds to lose. And then we have a fraud risk where employees, vendors, or external parties misuse the company fund or manipulate the records. Fraud risk exists in every organization, regardless of the size. It is deliberate action to deceive another person with the intention of gaining, something. So fraud can loosely be defined as like any behavior or which person intends to gain a dishonest advantage over the another. So a very important modern category is ESG and cybersecurity risk. So today the regulators expect companies to track environmental risk like pollution and climate impact. So the social risk like labor issues and governance risk like unethical practices. So this cybersecurity has grown exponentially in the last decade. One cyber attack can shut down the entire country, entire company. So finally, we have disaster risk or environmental and climate risk. With increasing climate change, companies faces the risk like flood and extreme heat and earthquakes, fires related to the environment issue. So all these non-financial risk might not appear in the balance sheet immediately, but they have a very big effect on the business continuity, sustainability, and the long run reputation. So when we talk,
Malliarjun wanted to share something at this
Yeah,
stage.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So, this slide is wonderful. So, one thing just to the participants is, so this is plattered into financial and non-financial, but the origin start from systematic risk and unsystematic risk. Now, what is systematic risk for a company? It's a market risk that affects the entire market or a large segment of it. Example, what it could be economic recession, could be inflation for a natural disaster, war, and changes in interest rate. This is a systematic. This is something external, applicable to not only you, to probably also your competitor. Now, unsystematic risk is it impacts the individual companies or industries. So here, the first one is non-diversifiable. So it can only be reduced through diversification, which helps to mitigate. In this case, you can help it to mitigate by going from one to another. So that means the second one, the internal factors within an organization or externally, but closely related to the organization is what will affect. Like in this example, country risk, very important. Not only country risk has several consequences, sanction risk. If you are an US subsidiary living in India, can you export something to Russia? Can you export to this? Even if you have somebody who is an US citizen receiving a material is also debarred. So in country risk itself, there are huge this thing. And multinationals, what we were doing when we are selling to a risk country, we used to make provision to an extent. That means today, if you sell 100, even when we sell, we already make a provision of 15% for that particular country because it's already clear from the trend that either political risk or the country's liquidity risk or macroeconomic risk may or may not be able to get back your money. So it starts from a macro, provided you are in that industry, and micro, which is more from your internal risk. Now, one thing which I missed in the beginning is all enterprise risk management is governed by two frameworks. Very important. If you have time, please read. One is called COSO. Now, COSO means it's a committee of sponsoring organization for Tradeway Commission. Now, these are the people based from US have set framework for internal control and risk management. Okay. Similarly, in ISO, you have ISO 31000, which takes care of the risk management process. What is the difference? COSO strengthens the link to governance and performance, whereas ISO provides principles and clean process you can tailor. Now, why I am taking this is what all nine as showed here, each of the risk needs to be looked at by that respective department or function. And unless and until the communication and the togetherness with the function is not there, it's not going to work. So it is not that risk is just a risk manager's job. It's a job of everyone, and that is what management job is, to see that this is done. And the job of the risk management committee, what liquidity risk, what Professor Bala addressed, it is probably today what risk management committee and board expects is not that whether it says, okay, what happens if the sale falls down by 30% and you have one customer to whom you are selling 20% of your sale. And if that fellow has a problem, what is your liquidity risk? Make a simulation, make a scenario mapping. And that scenario mapping is what is expected in an RMC. And that RMC tries to look at it, review, recommend framework policy, and take it to board for approval. So, in nutshell, some of us, we are in corporate legal, we are in finance, and we are in secretarial. But if you really see, each of them has an ownership. Corporate legal comes with reference, disclosure, or compliance. Finance is what will come with exposure, calibrate capital allocation to the appetite. So, as a company secretary, if you really want to give a very good this thing to the board or to the RMC, you need to go and start questioning them, asking them, "Hey, what is this? Why? What is that impact will come?" Today with AI having come, answers are very easy. Defining the best question or intuitive question is what is going to be difficult. And so for risk management also, from various risks he has said, it is about your ability to innovate and intuitively have the question which will what will bring this may happen if there is a risk here. What will we do if this happens? Who will have to take care? And that's how ownership is assigned. And I think she has covered in this slide more or less most of the this thing. One last thing I would try to say is, if you are in an industry which has got high risk. Now, when I say high risk, like what Bala Sahab said, chemical industry, handling hazardous material, it's a big risk when it comes to people, it comes to community. How do you take that hazardous material on road? What happens if the blast? What has been done by the company or the logistics supply to take care that the next door people or people who are on the road does not have an impact on it? Similarly, operation risk, not only internal, it is about when you take your equipment to the other side, like we were big suppliers to Reliance, Sudhakar sir. When we take there, our people will be working at height, so some of the safety risk also comes. All this finally translated today into the ESG reporting, whether BRSR or whatever, so I think very nicely put, but ultimately it is the reputation risk that will take you to a real beating. So anything that you do has an impact, but that impact could be financial and could be reputational. That I just thought I'll share.
Malliarjan, really you touched upon very nicely the systematic and unsystematic. Really speaking, as being a chemical company, I was telling you, in fact, we had some of the material which was only a monopoly supplier. Hardly any supplier. One or two people only were there actually. If those people stop the supply, what happens? Not only that, wherever we have the contract with the people, there is a what you call penalty clause was there. If you don't meet the supply in time, you will be paying so much of the penalty. So then what is the alternative? These are all the questions. Really speaking, we broke our head so much. and find out the alternative. Alternative was only importing the material at the cost of increasing the cost and mitigating the risk, but without compromising the quality of supply to the people, because otherwise our reputational risk is involved. These are all the things which are actually coming to the picture. You very nicely put it.
Yeah, I'll
Yeah.
also try to, probably the next slide, the risk treatment probably will come there. I will take this little later. Yeah.
Yes, Nayan, go ahead.
So now, as we have understood, like what the type of risk is there, and of course, then every industry has their own specific risk, which has to be identified at a very early stage. And this risk management committee, they have to need a 360-degree view, like in covering both the risk, like financial, non-financial, strategic, and traditional, emerging, internal, external. So the audit committee has to give a overall view towards identifying the risk as per the industry. So before we get into the steps of risk management process, let's understand why this management matters so much today. And as we live in a business environment where one unexpected incident can shake the entire organization, so whether it is a cyber attack, regulatory change, a supply chain disruption, or any climate event, so we have seen in the last 2 years how a single global event can influence the interest rate, shipping routes, raw material prices, and even the consumer behavior. So the company does not manage risk proactively, is always reacting late, but by the time they respond, the damage is already done. So this is why the risk management is not just a compliance requirement, it is a surviving tool. So it helps company to stay prepared, resilient, and ahead of the uncertainty. So they will allow the leadership to make the informed decision of emotional decisions, and most importantly, it prevents the small issues from becoming the big crisis. So risk management is now being considered globally as a part of corporate governance excellence, and board must regularly review the strategic, financial, operational, and ESG risk. So a well maintained risk register is central to ensuring that companies survival and value creation and the resilience. So first step comes is the risk identification. So this means looking at every area of the business and asking what could go wrong, and if we fail to identify a risk, we cannot manage it later. A very recent example is in the Ames Delhi cyber attack, which exposed how vulnerable India's healthcare data system were. So if the organization had identified the cyber vulnerability as a major risk earlier, so they could have upgraded the system before the attack happened. So risk identification is simply shining a light to all the possible risk, whether financial, operational, in any environmental or strategic. So this could always begin with the systematic identification, categorization, rating of risk, and creating a risk register. So every company should maintain it, and see like how, and they have to evaluate the impact and probability, like if it happens, then what is to be done. Then comes the risk analysis. Once we identified the risk, the next step is risk analysis, where we try to understand how likely the risk is and how much damage it can cause. So, for example, the Houthi attack in the Red Sea forced ships to divert through the longer route. So, the companies that had analyzed their supply chain risk earlier realized that disruption in the international shipping was likely due to the geopolitical tension. So, because they analyzed the risk, they acted early. So, diverting the route, planning the alternative supplier, and managing the inventory. Companies that ignored the possibility of such disruption and suffered a delays, and they increased the cost. Then come the risk assessment. After analyzing we move to the risk assessment, which means prioritizing the risk. Some risks are low impact, some are high impact, some are likely to happen soon, and others may happen rarely. So a recent example in the internet rate hike in India and globally. So the companies with high borrowing assessed that rising interest rate would affect the repayment and cash flow. So those who have assessed the risk early, they have structured their loans or reduce the expenses. So others felt the impact later. So risk assessment simply answers the question, which risk should we tackle first? And then comes the risk mitigation, the fourth step, where the company takes action to reduce the risk or eliminate it. And when the severe heat waves were, predicted this year across India, many companies immediately changed their work timings, provide cooling zone, shifted outdoor work to the mornings, and introduced the safety measures. So this is called the risk mitigation and taking the proactive steps based on the early warning signs. So after the recent Microsoft global outage shows how dangerous dependency on a single system could impact the whole business. Then
Not only that's, Nayan, in fact, in this, when we were actually working, we actually introduced what you call internal audit and as well as the external audit and the risk management periodically. And there are two things we used to get separately, especially financial and related things are concerned, and also internal check. We used to have a chartered accountant firm going into the internal check and internal system, internal control methods, and obtain the certificate from that. We used to publish in the board report as well. And apart from that, there is a regular internal audit, and every audit which is done, as you rightly said, understanding what is the what you call the priority of the risk, whether it is the high risk or it is immediately calling for the action, or it is medium risk, or it's a low risk, is a negligible risk, whatever it is. Those identification was actually done, and every sector, every segment, wherever the risk owners were actually there, that was the system which was actually functioning in our company. We used to publish even in our annual report also what are the risk management activities, what is the certification, etc., and other things and all. So this is what it is. And being a company secretary those days, I think Sudhagar will know definitely, much before the secretarial audit has come, we had what we call the secretarial compliance certificate, which used to be, applicable to the companies where the companies are not required to employ the company secretary. Although I was working in a listed company, we have listed multi exchanges. But what I used to do, I have actually told the management, let us get a secretarial compliance certificate from the independent professional separately, so that you know what is it, rather than I'm telling everything is compliant with it. Even that also voluntarily we used to publish. So these are all the things which has to come actually voluntarily, putting the things as you saying a proactive actions. Yeah. Sudhakar, you would like to add something?
I'd like to add is only one thing, that previous slide and this slide is the entire, most important in the entire presentation. In the previous slide, what Nayan did was he has identified the types of risk, and here in this particular slide, it is the risk management process. If we study both these slides, it is very clear that and Mr. Malik also has mentioned the same thing. When you are identifying the risk, and when you are measuring the risk, and when you are mitigating the risk management itself cannot do anything. The risk management committee, I mean to say, that the directors who are out there. That might be the reason why SEBI has said that this is the only committee which is not a board managed committee. Executives of the organization are also being permitted to be members of this particular committee. So while you are constituting this particular committee, you cannot make every HOD as a part of this committee. So you have to see that who are the crucial people who have to be made the members of this committee, because the majority of this committee should be directors, independent directors rather. So it is imperative for the organization that they have to ensure at least there should be some permanent invitees to the risk management committee, so that whichever are the functions which are prone to risk, and those risks are to be periodically to be identified and to be measured. At the same point of time, sometimes one of the major risk what always happens maybe is a disruption risk. You can't imagine, you can't be a proactive because you cannot visualize certain times. Say, for example, the COVID, what happened? Nobody could have imagined that COVID is going to take place. We never, in fact, experienced that what sort of impact it is going to have it. But according to me, the kind of resilience what India, despite the fact it is a developing country, the way it could rise within no time, and that also unfortunately happened at the fag end of the financial year. In the month of March, it happened. So people can't go to offices; they have to work from home, and work from home also. How we have to do that? We were having no clue about it, because everybody is not having a laptop or a computer at home. But the way the organization, the way the regulator has reacted to and then not only reacted, actually acted upon. I will say it is not a reaction, it is an action. The way they have acted upon, So same is the case in case of this risk identification, measurement, and mitigation also. Say, for example, in case of Reliance, the oil refinery is there. In that particular refinery, the not only the cyber attack, it is an enemy attack which is also equally important. Because, say, for example, it is in a border state. Anything may happen. And God forbids if anything happens, the entire country's economy is going to get a great impact. So when a company like Reliance, what it has to also identify the risk is that not only cyber attack or any other attack, but it is an enemy attack also. So that's why whenever we are constituting a risk management committee as company secretaries, we should not merely do the tick box exercise to comply with your that particular regulation, whatever it is. What we need to do is, in fact, I said this in several training programs of mine. We always say that board familiarization program, board induction, and board trainings are there. But according to me, the committees are also to have some kind of an induction program. When you have been made a member of any committee, whether it is an audit committee, NRC, or risk management committee, especially these are the major committees, they should have the domain knowledge. Everybody might have some kind of a knowledge, but that business domain knowledge is required. So they need to be trained for that particular purpose. When you are constituting the board itself, under the listing regulations, you need to identify the skill sets and you need to map the skill sets to the respective directors also, which is to be published in the annual report. So at the time when you are identifying the skill sets, you need to have that for risk management committee, what sort of members I have to have, what sort of skill sets they need to have. That is very important to know. So as company secretaries, we also have to be sometimes proactive. We have to also act beyond the complaints. We should not confine ourselves to the complaints only. According to me, as a complaints officer, our job is 50% complaints, but the remaining 50% is how you are acting upon, what sort of role you are envisaging for yourself in the organization. And accordingly, you have to get yourself penetrated in the system. Several times we have been told that, look, company secretaries have not been taken into the strategy for formulation and all these things. You have to penetrate yourself in the system and you should be able to play a vital role. Yes, Mr. Malik.
Very, very nicely put, Sudhakar. And this slide is the most critical. And risk analysis. Just remember, participant, what happens in risk analysis? Likelihood, consequence, and level of risk. These three are most critical. And what will be the RMC or board will look at is likelihood. Like we talk about cyber security. How many times it has happened, what patches have been put, which patches not done. So likelihood, consequence, and level of risk. Now, based on the level of risk, like what she already said, what happens is in companies, what we do. So, like whenever we used to make a nice XY chart, the likelihood and the impact. Now, the impact could we call it EBIT. EBIT means earnings before interest. How does it affect that particular business? Then it will be consolidated to the corporation. Okay. So, high impact, low impact, then high impact. So what happens is when you have a low impact and low likelihood, lena chahiye, inherent risk, accept it. When you have a low impact, high likelihood, you reduce it. Now, how do you reduce it? Either you have to see that you implement controls to lower the risk. That means inherent risk after some control becomes residual risk. Okay. Then what could be high impact, low likelihood? That means likelihood is going to be very low, but high. This we need to transfer. Now, how do you transfer? Either you take insurance or in project companies, what we do is we do a back-to-back agreement with the sub-supplier, with the subcontractor. That means if you have a risk, you are equally transferred to the extent of the supplier to that. So that is how you transfer risk. And last is high impact, high likelihood, avoid. eliminate the activity, eliminate the exposure. Like the board may say, I don't want to deal with a chemical which is going to be highly, hazardous to handle. We will not get into that business. We will not get into that country. And that is what the board or the RMC looks at, to give you a heat map, to give a scenario analysis. What exactly is happened? What will happen if I do this? What happens if there is a velocity? That means that particular thing is going to speed up faster than what we were thinking last year. Okay, so I thought I explained. This is the most critical slide, I would say, beyond the framework and the regulatory. The work happens only here, and this is where the cross-functional team has to be very open, transparent, communicative, so that the first identification is not missed. So that's what I just thought. Thank you.
So before we go for the specific legal provisions, so I'll give you the quick introduction that legal framework which the India has given, like both in the Companies Act and the SEBI listing regulations. So they have introduced the legal framework to for the risk management, which is a mandatory governance requirement. So the purpose behind this was very clear, that regulator realized that many corporate failure in India were not because of companies are weak, but because there are risks which were not identified and reported, and which has not been acted upon on time. So the Companies Act plays a very places the responsibility directly to the board and audit committee and independent director, ensuring that risk oversight is not left only to the management. And SEBI, on the other hand, went step forward and created the risk management committee under the LODR, and making it compulsory for listed companies to continuously monitor emerging the risk like cybersecurity, ESG issues, and financial exposure. So the legal structure has definitely give a strength to the governance, and it is still a scope of improvement we have. India still, somewhere lack a standardization of risk reporting format, and there is no uniform risk maturity model is there. And so the many companies still treat, risk management only as a compliance exercise rather than strategy. They didn't act as a strategic function. So SEBI is moving in the right direction, but future reforms may include a clearer ESG risk guidelines, cyber resilience standard, and there should be some stricter enforcement or RMC function. So overall, this legal framework ensures that risk management is not optional. It is a legal duty and very important for the corporate governance. So now have a quick view on like what Companies Act embeds the risk management into the governance.
Now, one comment is that, some of the sections have also interlinking to audit committees. And
Yes.
based on audit committee and RMCs, I would say their oversight, some of the board makes a responsibility statement, whether it is internal control, adequacy, or risk management process. So some topics are little bit interlinked. So there has to be a very good uh, linkage between these two committees and the people involved. So that's very critical from an organization perspective. Yeah.
So, as per the Companies Act, the Act is designed with a clear intention to ensure that companies do not run on assumptions or optimize the optimism alone, but they have to be prepared, accountable, and oversight. And risk management is actually treated as a fundamental component of the corporate governance principle and the code of conduct. As you see in section 134, where the board responsibility has been given for the risk management, and it requires that board has to include a statement in the board report about the development, implementation of risk management policy. And it seems like, simple disclosure requirement, but it completely changes the responsibility dynamics. And by mandating this disclosure, the law has, makes the board directly accountable for identifying the key business risks, approving the risk management policy, and monitoring its implementation. And the penalty reinforces the seriousness, like 3 lakh rupees penalty on the company, and there is a 50,000 penalty on each officer in default. So this creates a culture where risk is not hidden, ignored, or it has been delegated downward. So it must be acknowledged at the highest level, and it has to be communicated transparently to the stakeholders. For example, in a recent case which has involved a manufacturing company that suffered a major losses due to a fire. So during the investigation, it was found that board had not reviewed the risk management policy for years. And because of section 134, they faced a very strict scrutiny and the penalties. And it demonstrates that law expects proactive oversight, not just the reactive excuses to provide. Section 177 of the Companies Act, it dedicated a role of an audit committee, specifically stating that they must evaluate the internal financial controls, risk management system, and their adequacy and the effectiveness. So the provision ensuring that risk is examined independently without managing the sugar coating or any biasness. So the governance logic in audit committee is to act as the eyes and the ears of the board. It is designed to challenge the assumptions, question the management decisions, examine the vulnerabilities, and recommend the improvements. In many cyber breach cases seen last year, the audit committees that were proactive pushed their companies to adopt the multi-factor authentication, encryption standards, and data backup protocols. So the companies did not strengthen the internal control. They have suffered the operational shutdowns and ransom demands and reputational damages. So this shows why Section 177 is more than a compliance. It protects the DNA of the company, Section 177. So Schedule 4, where covers the role of an independent director, it gives a clear mandate to independent director that they must review the risk management system, ensure the proper implementation, verify the risk mitigation step, which is actually happening, and intervene when the company is exposed to some checked risk. So the independent director act as a guardian of this of stakeholder interest. So especially they have to monitor the shareholders, and the independent judgment should ensure the management does not overlook risk for the short-term gains. For example, in the ILFS crisis, one of the key finding was that the independent director were not adequately informed about the underlying financial risk. So had Schedule 4 obligation been followed in spirit, and with deeper questioning and stronger oversight, some of the damage could have been considered, could have been contained earlier. So Section 135, which is CSR, it is a linking ESG and sustainability risk, we can say, and this is very important and it has been overlooked very often. So Section 135 and CSR rules encourage company to integrate the ESG and sustainability risk into their CSR planning. So which includes like climate related risk, community risk, environmental impact, social disruption, long-term sustainability threat. So the message is very clear that CSR is not just a donation. It is, in a long term, it is a risk reduction for a companies. And for example, a company operating in a drought-prone area, they have invested CSR funds in water recharge projects and the sustainable agriculture. So this is not only improve the community relation, but it reduces the operational risk because water-intensive operation were protected over the long term. So even CSR is seen as a part of risk management. Now moving to the major legal pillar about the SEBI LODR 2015, which is commonly covers, unlike the Companies Act, which sets broad governance expectations. So SEBI LODR provide very highly practical, detailed and enforceable requirement for the listed companies. So the main intention behind these regulation is to ensure that no listed company hide the risk and react late to the emerging threats. Regulation 17 requires companies to establish a procedure to keep the board of director informed about its risk management and minimization of the minimization strategies. So SEBI is very clear that risk management cannot be left to the middle management. The board must be fully aware and actively engaged in the governance part. So SEBI expect board to function like a strategic sentinels and like continuously questioning the management, challenging the assumptions, and ensuring the preparedness what company is doing. And after the case of Yes Bank crisis, SEBI observed that there was a board was not fully aware of the concentration risk in the loan portfolio. So the failure led to the stricter regulations, and now most banks present the monthly risk dashboard to their boards, including the exposure analysis, fraud alert, NPA hotspots, and even the early warning signals. So this shows how Regulation 17 pushes the company toward the structured and data-driven risk reporting. Regulation 62, which is risk procedure for HVDL and companies, like Regulation 62D and 62I, it addresses the high value debt listed entities that raise money through the public debt. And these companies are required to keep the board continuously informed about the risk and establish the structured procedure and mandatory constitute the RMC. Why this is important? Because companies with listed debt must contain cash flow stability and repayment capability. So any risk, supply chain failure, operational disrupt, so that can impact their ability to repay the bondholders. For example, in 2023, there were several infrastructure companies were there who issued the NCDs, and due to the global interest rate fluctuation and commodity price volatility, SEBI requires them to present a detailed risk scenario. So what happened if steel prices increases 20%? What happened if interest rate rise again? What if monsoon delays affect the construction timeline? So this shows how SEBI expect the debt listed companies to model and communicate the risk very proactively. And in 2021 SEBI amendment, there is a mandatory ESG and sustainability risk. And this is one of the most important forward-looking change in corporate governance. And the SEBI amendment, that regulation 2021 mandates that there should be the risk management framework must cover the ESG and sustainability risk, including climate, environmental impact, social disruption, governance failure, human risk, right issue, data privacy, and supply chain sustainability. SEBI realized that traditional financial risk alone cannot protect an organization. The biggest risk today is cyber, climate, and reputational come silently, but they hit suddenly. So for example, like HDFC Bank, Infosys, Reliance, and Tata Steel all periodically report a climate-related risk in their annual reports, including carbon transition risk, water scarcity risk, common conflict risk, cyber attack probability, ESG supply chain exposure. So these are the disclosure which are directly driven by the SEBI's ESG amendment. So and another example I can quote here is the FMCG companies, which is recently faced reputational and regulatory risk due to the concern over the product integration and environmental impact. So under the ESG risk management, these risks must now be proactively identified and mitigated.
Just one comment on the previous or between audit committee and risk committee, what I was saying. Please, it's important for participant to understand control is part of risk management. Very important. And risk management is the overarching process, while control is the implementation of a specific measure to mitigate the risk. Okay. And so it is, even though both contribute a lot to the board responsibility statement on control and risk management, but it's important that the linkage is very, very, very critical. Certain times it comes from what the risk management committee's outcome is coming from the internal control, or it could be the vice versa. I just thought just to share on this. There are one or two important, very interesting question. We will look at it. Sudhakarji is there and Bala is there. We will look at it at the end.
So the another regulation 21, which makes it mandatory for the top 1,000 listed entities, that all HVDL listed entities to form a risk management committee. So there should be the minimum 3 members as per the law, and majority must be the board members and at least one independent director to ensure that risk oversight stayed at a senior and independent level, not just at the management. And it must be board member in ideally an independent director, and the minimum meeting like 2 meetings per year, and gap not exceeds the 210 days. And SEBI introduced this to avoid the earlier practices where RMCs meet only once a year with no real review. And the quorum should be like at least 2 members or 1/3, whichever is higher. And Schedule 5 of the SEBI LODR, which requires a company to disclose in their annual report about whether the RMC is constituted or not, how often it met key risk, and how they were managed. And status of mitigation, this promotes the transparency and investor trust. Schedule 3 of Para C, it gives the detailed responsibilities of RMC, which give the key responsibility, like we can say, define a comprehensive risk management policy, maintain a business continuity plan, ensure that system and methodology exist, and there is an overseas implementation, review of risk policy every 2 years, and then manage the appointment and removal of the chief risk officer. So there are some gaps which were observed by the SEBI, that there in many companies, even the large ones, do not appoint a CRO. So this weakens the governance structure because there is no single person accountable for the enterprise wide risk. So industry, big banks, NBFC as an insurance company, and the tech companies now have full-time CROs who report directly to the board or the RMCs. And another gap found is like cybersecurity risk not reviewed by the RMC. So cyber risk is now one of the most top three risk, which is across all the industries as there, and yet many RMCs still don't review the penetration tests. They don't do vulnerability scans. They don't do ransomware preparedness and access the control report. And there is no linkage between the risk management and the business strategy. This is one of the biggest red flag. Companies often prepare a beautiful risk register, but they don't align them with the strategy. So the company must set an ambitious expansion plan, but ignore risk like working capital, supply chain disruption, and there is regulatory delays are also there. And one of the another red flag is RMC minutes lack action items. So many RMC minutes are very generic. Risk register reviewed, cyber updated note, team to monitor. So SEBI wants specific time bound and actionable outcomes. So this means the naming the responsible person, deadline, follow up times, and measurement indicator should be there in the real governance and just not the compliance. RMC meeting frequency below the SEBI norms. And SEBI wants minimum 2 meetings, but industry best practice is 4 meetings per year, which is aligned with the quarterly reporting.
Just I take a minute. I just take a minute before the case study because the cyber security is, probably. So just to go back, the slide where Sudhakar and we said it's very critical. Now in cyber security, what really happens? If you're a company secretary, you're going to give some, document. So risk assessment identity. That means you identify and classify your assets, hardware, software, data, whatever. Then analyze risk. What threat and vulnerability that could affect the asset. Okay. Then assess the potential impact. Document, like what Balasab says, risk register. That is the assessment and identification. The next level is security control and mitigation. That means implement technical control. What control? Firewall, secure configuration, access control, malware protection. These could be. Then how do you manage the access? Give strong password, implement multi-factor authentication to sensitives, And the third one, which is what RMC and board looks at, is about patch and update. Regularly, whether the system has updated with the patch, what is the vulnerability on the patch fixations, and ensure the data backup. You are all aware, 3-2-1. What is 3-2-1? 3 copies, 2 different media, 1 offsite. This is the way to protect this thing. And incidents response and recovery. So in incident response and recovery, these days, what happens is the key risk indicator is RTO and RPO. What is RTO? That means one is RTO answers how fast you must recover. So when you have a service level agreement, you say, I want to recover in 15 minutes, 1 hour. The other is RPO, which is how much data loss is acceptable. If there is an attack, will I recover in 20 minutes? And what backup will I lose only 10 minutes or will I lose 1 day? Now, these are the things at the dashboard level and RMC probably looks at, and that what gives them comfort level or better oversight. I just thought I'd share with you this.
So there are some case studies which we have quoted here. So one of us is the Yes Bank, which is one of the best example of how institution can look extremely successful on the outside, but still it carries the enormous risk on the inside. So before this crisis, Yes Bank appeared to be the star performance. There is a rapid loan growth, high market confidence, IFC backing, and aggressive expansion. So everything looked very positive. But underneath the success story, several risk indicators were silently building up. So the bank was lending aggressively beyond its risk appetite, and especially to the high risk corporates such as ADAG, DHFL, and ILFS. So deposits were not growing at the same pace, leading to the liquidity pressure. So the asset quality was deteriorating, but NPAs were being underreported. So this is a classic case of governance failure, where the external number looks good, but internal control systems were weak. And when RBI later conducted an asset quality review, the real NPA number come to the light and entire situation spared the downward. So the bank capital position weakened and governance lapses surface, and the contagion from falling the NBFCs worsened its position. So the despite depositor began withdrawing the funds, creating panic. At this stage, it becomes clear that the risk management committee had failed to identify the concentration risk in the loan portfolio. So they did not question why so many loans were, concentrated in a financially stressed group. A strong RMC would have been raised early warning and to control the crisis. So RBI imposed a moratorium, restructured and the board and the SEBI, SBI stepped in with the capital infusion. So the key takeaway from the Yes Bank is that unchecked growth without strong risk governance eventually leads to the collapse. So the revival become possible only when governance were restored and risk were transparently addressed.
And I think that is the reason the even now the different experience of different directors is insisted, so they can foresee the different risks and bring input to the company and to the board. Yeah,
And
Nay.
another case is of ILFS, where on the other hand, it is an example of how company that was considered too big to fail. It had AAA credit rating, backing from major institutions like LIC, SBI, and over 91,000 crores in debt, and more than 300 subsidiaries engaged in the crucial infrastructure projects. So on paper, ILFS looked invincible, but beneath the surface, the organization was carrying the severe structure weakness. So the first sign of trouble appeared when ILFS began defaulting on ICD repayments, SIDBI loans, and commercial paper. So liquidity suddenly tightened and panic spread across the money market. So the rating agencies downgraded ILSF from AAA to D in an unbelievable span of 45 days. So revealing how risk had been, grossly misjudged for years. And the real causes were deep rooted. ILFS had a massive asset liability mismatch, borrowing short term while investing in the long term project. So this leading to the cash flow stress. Its structure was extremely complex and opaque, that making it difficult for board and auditor to access the true financial position. So loan were being taken to repay the older loans, which is a red flag in any risk framework. So the risk management committee also failed significantly here. So it did not detect the ALM mismatch, did not monitor the subsidiary level cash flow, and did not raise the escalation regarding the funding irregularity. So when the crisis erupted, the government had to, suppress the board and appoint the Uday Kotak to steer the restructuring and classify the entities into the green, amber, red bucket, and enforce the stricter light liquidity and governance norm for the NBFCs. So the ILFS crisis reminded that the entire country that governance is more important than size. A company can be enormous, but if its risk system are weak, the collapse is inevitable. And ILFS demonstrate that the transparency, accountability, and risk oversight cannot be compromised at any scale. So when we talk about the risk management committee, so
1 minute.
yeah.
Sorry, Nayan, 1 minute. If you see both these cases, S Bank and ILFS, they're more than the risk. Actually, this particular thing fall under the fraudulent risk basket. This is nothing but a fraud, and it is like the fence is eating the crop. That kind of a scenario here. In both these cases, the bosses are involved. The top boss is involved in both these cases, and rest of the people who were supposed to blow the whistle or whatever it is, to some extent, they were mute spectators. And ultimately, it got brewed up and it came out in the limelight. So these are, though it is a risk, no doubt about it, but exactly they are not falling in that risk category, according to me. This is nothing but a fraud. But yes, no doubt about it. Suppose sometimes when the fence is eating the crop, that means the promoters are getting involved into these kind of things. How this is to be mitigated? It is easier said than what's called as doing the things. Okay, by that, it is basically the auditor, the internal audit department, they are the people, or maybe somebody has to blow the whistle. Then the committees, the what's called audit committee or risk management committee, these committees should be strong enough and take these people, to task by questioning them. To some extent, even the committees were also subservient to the board, and board was subservient to the people who are the promoters. Basically, in both the cases, it is the promoter only. Yes, Malik.
In fact, Sudhakar, one of the participants also putting, but he is putting little softer voice. He is saying it is not simply a over risk management. This is actually a financial mismanagement. He's a little softly. He has put the same way what you said.
No, I always try to, whenever I do this risk assessment for some of the, it's about the fraud triangle. I take a minute. Now, this fraud triangle is devised by what is called Donald Cressy. Now, what is this fraud triangle? Three items really push a person or a group of people towards doing a fraud: pressure, opportunity, and rationalization. Now, what could be pressure? You all know results, results, results. Okay, number, number, number. Okay, or revenge. It could be addiction. It could be somebody has an addiction that is pressure, family problem, and coercion probably sometimes. And I need them. Today I need the money. Could be an issue how you put pressure. Opportunity is poor governance. Why opportunity comes? Because poor governance, poor control, exploiting errors, inadequate segregation of duty. Very important. Segregation of duty is the key for control and risk management. Okay. Abuse of authority, overriding management, overriding controls is abuse of authority. Okay. And that's what could have happened in some of the cases that we have. A lack of effective oversight could be at committee or could be at. And last is rationalization. We always say, मुझे क्यों fraud किया? मुझे पैसा इतना नहीं मिलता है. I don't get so much paid. When he is doing, why I will not do? So when you are in in the company secretary or in any of your role, please think of this fraud triangle. Get into the soft mode. I always been also be an HR person, because when you get into the softer mode, then you understand the people and their behavior, which can be converted into a little bit. So this fraud triangle of Donald Cressy, please take time to read. Very interesting. And then he has given a lot of details. It can be related to what many places where the problems happen. It's also related to that. So I just thought I should share what I know, at least on the fraud triangle. Anyway, section 447 from Companies Act take care of the repercussion of it. But I thought, it's I will share on.
Mallikarjun very rightly said, actually, one of the things what you call a rationalization. In fact, I remember when we are actually from an unlisted public company, we went to the public listed company. So many responsibilities and the things, etc., is increased. And again, so many regulations started appearing. The role of the many senior executives, etc., is also changed. At that particular time, with the advisory which came from the group consultancy, we actually studied what are the similar industries in which the level of the peoples are getting paid. That time we aligned all our salary structure, remuneration structure in line with the salary standards, and we increased. Many of them has got 2 times, 3 times the rise also saying that. That means suddenly people realize, oh, I have been exploited so long, I've been underpaid so long. Those are the things also we have seen actually once you put in the rationalization. Yes, Nain, go ahead.
Yeah, so when we talked about the risk management committee, so one of the most important aspect is understanding what actually happens inside the RNC meeting. So the SEBI expect RNC to function like a strategic oversight body, not a symbolic committee. So the agenda of the RNC meeting should be structured, comprehensive, and closely aligned with the company's risk appetite and business realities. So this here you can see there is some typical agendas I have covered. So the meeting usually begins with a review of the previous meeting minutes and the action taken report. So this is extremely important because many committees identify risk but fail to track whether the mitigation actions were actually implemented or not. So this action taken report ensures the accountability and prevents the issues from being forgotten or left open. So after this, the RMC review the risk dashboard, which includes the key risk, KRI, and any changes since the last meeting. So the dashboard gives the committees a pulse check on the organization, helping them to see what risks are rising and which ones are reducing and where the vulnerabilities are emerging. So a dedicated agenda item is always allotted to the cyber security and technology risk because the cyber threats have become unpredictable nowadays and extremely damaging the company's reputation. So many companies review the red flags such as the ransomwares, attempts, and phishing patterns or result of the vulnerability. So the committee also review the ESG sustainability risk. And SEBI expect companies to look beyond the financial risk and capture the long-term strategic risk in these areas. Regulatory and compliance risk. which are not another major agenda point can be. And this with frequent changes in tax rules, MCA circular, SEBI notification, RBI guidelines, sectoral laws, compliances has become one of the most highest risk area of companies. So any non-compliance can lead to the financial penalty, reputational damage, and even the operational restrictions. So the RMC then reviews the status of the business continuity plan, disaster recovery plan that become especially important after the global supply chain disruption and data loss incident. So the committee should evaluate whether the organization is actually prepared to the continue operating during the disruptions. For financial sector companies like ALM and liquidity risk is also reviewed in detail because mismatches in cash flow have caused collapses like ILFS and DHFL. So if the organization has a CRO, if CRO is a chief risk officer, which represent a report on enterprise-wide risk, internal control and major incident since the last meeting. So RMC also review the company's risk appetite statement to ensure that business decision, especially expansion plans, capital allocation, are within the acceptable risk limit. So another part of the meeting is the discussion of emerging risk. And these are risks not yet visible in traditional dashboard, but it is such as geopolitical shift, tariff changes, climate pattern. So many companies missed early warning signs because they do not actively look into the emerging risk. The committee also reviewed the risk management policy either annually or every 2 year biannually. So depending on the industry practice, and this ensures that the risk framework involves with a changing business environment and regulatory expectations. So finally, any other matter is taken up, usually include in the incidental report, audit observation and the feedback. So overall, these agenda ensures that RMC meeting become a structured and meaningful and forward-looking governance discussion. So the good RMC meeting is not just a review, it is about anticipating them and preparing the organization to ensure that risk management become a part of a company's culture rather than just a compliance requirement. So before I explain the specific role that of the company secretary in the risk management, it is important to place this discussion in a global context. And so the modern risk management originates from the COSO Enterprise Risk Management Framework, which was introduced in 2004, which remains one of the most widely recognized framework in the world. And COSO defines ERM as a process which is to be led by the board and supported by the management and the employees, employed across the strategy setting, day-to-day operations. So within the ultimate objective of identifying potential events and managing the risk within the organization's appetite. So the core message of COSO is very clear that risk management is not a department, it is a culture, a discipline, and a way an organization behave to protect and create the value. So in India, our Companies Act and SEBI LODR aligns very closely with this global philosophy, but they add stronger governance requirements suitable for the Indian market. So now, within this ecosystem, the company secretary play a central coordinating role. A CSV assist the board in building and periodically reviewing an enterprise-wide risk management framework. So we ensure that the organization has a structured approach for identifying, assessing and mitigating the monitoring and reporting the risk. And this approach is consistent across all the departments. A framework alone is not effective unless the entire organization understands it. So we also conduct our internal communication, training, awareness programs to embed a strong risk culture. And we act as the bridge between the management, the risk officer and the risk management committee by ensuring the smooth timely flow of information, risk dashboard, mitigation report, emerging risk alert, so the board can make an informed decision. So company secretary role is not to ensure that every major organization initiative such as capex, expansion, technology adoption, now product restructuring and includes a mandatory risk assessment. And this is exactly in line with the COSO emphasis on integrating the ERM into the strategy and the operations. So on the regulatory side, the company secretary continuously monitors update from the SEBI, MCA, RBI and other regulators, ensuring that organization remains compliant with the evolving governance and risk related obligations. So company secretary coordinate internal audit and regulatory inspection that involves the risk management practices. So we are responsible for maintaining the risk registers, preparing the risk heat maps, monitoring KRI, ensuring early warning mechanism. And for listed companies, disclosure themselves are a risk are a risk area, so that a CS ensure timely and accurate disclosure to the stock exchange and prevents issues arising from the delayed or misleading information or disclosures. So another key role is supporting the board in drafting the risk appetite statement, which is defining the organization risk culture, expectations, monitoring whether actual behavior aligns with the stated risk tolerance or not. So we also evaluate whether the risk responses chosen by the management, whether to avoid, whether to reduce or accept a risk, or are appropriate or consistent with the board approval. So along with the internal audit, we ensure internal control framework and matrices and duties and reconciliations and approvals are aligned with the risk mitigation objectives. So we also manage the effectiveness of internal communication by establishing a proper channel such as risk dashboard and circulars, risk alert, and ensuring that risk communication flows top down, bottom up, and cross functionally. So finally, we can enable the periodic evaluation of the overall ERM performance, including the COSO components such as internal environment, object setting, and control activities. As we reach the final segment of this session, it is important to recognize that critical role that company secretary plays in strengthening the organization risk management framework. So the company secretary is no longer limited to the company's compliance or secretarial function. We sit at a intersection of governance and risk strategy. So one of our foremost responsibility is to ensure that organization has an effective ERM framework. So not just a document, but a living system that identifies and escalates the risk proactively. So we ensure that risk awareness is not restricted to one department, but it also understood across the entire organization, including the business team, operation, finance, and technology. So the good company secretary help integrating the risk management into day-to-day decision making and broader organization initiatives. So whether it is a new project, expansion, investment, vendor onboarding, we bring a governance lens by asking the right question about the risk exposure. So another key contribution is supporting the board and risk management committee. And compliance is another critical area. We ensure that company adhere to all the risk related legal including SEBI, LODR, Companies Act, ESG disclosure. So the company secretary plays a very major role in monitoring and reporting the risk. Um, Ensuring that risk registers are updated and dashboard reflect the picture. And equally important is overseeing the disclosure requirement. Transparent and accurate disclosure is there in annual report, RMC report, and CSR update. ESG filing, board report, and help build investor trust and regulatory confidence. And finally, the company secretary should review whether the organization risk response strategies such as mitigation, transfer, or acceptance. So we are appropriate and aligned with the long-term business, that risks are not ignored, hidden, or underestimated. We should bring a structure, accountability, and transparency to the ecosystem, which becomes a crucial to protect the organization from the crisis like which we have discussed today. So risk management is not just a regulatory requirement, it is a governance philosophy, we can say. And now I would like feel free to ask anything, whether it is Companies Act and SEBI LODR. So we can open for the round of questions if anyone has. Thank you so much.
Nine, as you rightly said, the company secretary himself being a risk owner for the compliance related issue, he'll be able to appreciate the action which will be the other risk owners, and accordingly he can coordinate, give the better input. That is the role he has to actually.
It's very nicely put. And only one thing is, see, these days the boards also have, even though we may say, sometimes in our company it doesn't happen, but most of the good companies, the risk management or the board, they expect online dashboards which will come from. So it's also duty of company secretary to be part of certain. Say, ESG is just not to just file. You have be involved in when they select a ESG platform of SaaS, where the report comes out of various, and how those indicators can be linked to these key risks, and then it can be so that your job is more about strategically presenting to the committees and the board something in a visual way by which their understanding is quicker, and that enables them to take strategic decision. And so it's nobody will come and tell you you go. It's your own. आपको खुद को you have to kick yourself to go beyond what you are doing. And it's very important. Go beyond. Don't overstep. But please do not hesitate to go beyond. Talk to your managing director. Why not be present like this? Why not we give this? And that's what will take you to probably uh, above the bar, I would say. And these the times are changing. What probably a 22, 23-year-old girl is able to do quickly is probably not someone else will do. So you have to adapt yourself to generations and to the technology. It's from a company secretary perspective. I think it's very important. It's not only to know about the what is there in the section, but beyond the section, what is there in the business is what is important.
I think we can take the questions now actually. Sudhakar sir, your questions which is there actually on Reliance. What is actually the Reliance as a find the risk mitigation to ensure the defined war-like situation attack from the Pakistan being near to the border in Jamnagar? This risk is a national risk and it can disrupt the supplies, unprecedented destructions, and high loss of life.
See, this I have already answered this question, and okay, that because Reliance used to have to develop their own security personnel instead of depending upon an outside agency. That, as I have mentioned, that we used to have a separate company, Reliance Security Solutions Limited. So this company used to hire the people from the retired army personnel, retired paramilitary forces, retired IB officers, all these people, okay, that considering the size of the company, considering that refineries are virtually the national assets. Apart from that thing, God forbids if anything happens, the loss is going to be humongous. So considering all these things, at one stage, even we went to the ultimately that okay, ICSF has been taken as the security measures, industrial security for ISFC or whatever they may call it. I am forgetting the name of that thing exactly. So that it is not only the Reliance is protecting its refineries; it is being protected by the central forces also. And whenever there is a definitely, okay, you have your intelligence network and all those things. If any kind of things is there, definitely the government intervenes in that.
Where the risk committee is not mandatorily required, can the company be assigned the responsibility of the audit and the company can rename the audit and the risk committee?
See, primarily, risk management committee is mandatory for the top 1,000 listed entities, if I am not wrong. And all the others, they have to have it voluntarily, they can appoint it or not. So it all depends upon the organization, how they are taking the initiative and all. That is what we said that, okay, that just don't go as a tick box exercise, and okay, depending upon if your company is a very sensitive one, definitely better to have a risk management committee. And merely having a risk management committee is not the end of it. As I have mentioned, that proper people should be there with proper what's called knowledge, experience, maturity of mind, and everything. At the same point of time, also that that the board should be able to listen and appreciate whatever the risk management committee says. Otherwise, just for the heck of doing it, just for the sake of corporate governance, if you are doing a tick box exercise and constitute a committee, and then some one or two independent directors are there, if that one or two executives are there, there is no point in that. In fact, today I was going through one entry of Mr. Ananta, his name, Mr. Anant Narayan, who was the former whole-time member of SEBI. That experts on okay, that one or two I will just read out for that. We will understand what exactly is the governance means. He was talking about the resignation of a CFO. A resignation of a CFO doesn't extinguish his accountability. A CFO who signs off misleading accounts, overrides controls, or withdraw material information can't evade responsibility by exiting early. There is an important distinction between a CFO who raises red flags, document his concerns, and resigns only after the board refuses to take the corrective action, and one who resigns quietly without a tracing of a hope to distance themselves from a future fallout. So what they expect is by that This RMC should have the ability to raise the red flags. At the same point of time, the board should have the ability to accept those red flags and then take the necessary things. In both these cases of your S Bank and ILFS, had it happened, that the debacle would not have taken place. Actually, see, whenever any kind of fraudulent thing happens, they have to be nipped in the bud itself. But again, the same thing I say that when the fence crop, I mean, start eating the crop, who will save it? So that is the reason.
I have
No,
few doubts on this. Yeah. Yes,
I
please.
just second what exactly Sudhakar put it. See, in companies that are in Europe, I mainly was in German, Swiss, and French. There is no mandatory risk committee. They only say that risk and control compliance system should be in place. And so some have a separate, the others have audit and risk committee. So never look at risk just because it is mandatory or not. It is about कितना तुम्हारा पैकेट को खराब कर रहा है ओनर का पैकेट को या किसको. That is what is important. But that's how much stakeholder is impacted by not doing a risk. So I think very nicely said to that.
I have a few doubts on how these risks are addressed or prevented. A, insider trading. B, third-party transaction. C, non-disclosure by NED, ID of certain informations to the company or ROC.
Like you will address it, should I address this question?
I know you
Yeah,
can take it, sir.
See, that as far as your insider trading regulations are concerned, it is not a risk management committee domain. Insider trading, you cannot say it is a risk. That insider trading should be either compliance issue, it is a governance issue, and it is up to the company secretary who is the compliance officer. It is completely in his domain that what sort of controlling measures he has to have it. Suppose if you fail to do that, okay, for whatever the reasons it is, definitely SEBI surveillance is there anyway. As far as a compliance officer, the whatever I mean, there within your scope. Say, for example, if somebody is doing an insider trading through a third party and all those things, like that the case of Infosys and Wipro, the employees have done something in collusion. Those kind of things you may not be able to do it, and that is not necessary for you to do it as a compliance officer also. Basically, insider trading related risks are concerned. If it is a fraudulent thing, it is not in the company's domain. That, of course, is the SEBI takes care of that. But as far as other things are concerned, compliance related issues are concerned, by the contra trading, that then, by the window closure period, no tradings to take place. Then you have to take the prior approval of the compliance officer. All those measures, it comes in your domain that you have to take care of that. Third party transactions, as I already mentioned about it, that SEBI takes care of that. Non-disclosures by non-executive directors and independent directors of certain information details to company of to ROC. See, this is, in fact, yesterday only I was talking to somebody. If any kind of that non-compliance takes place as far as Section 188 is concerned, that is related party transactions, the concerned director becomes disqualified to act as the director of a company. So to that extreme it goes. At the same point of time, that Section 166 is their duties of directors. So they are obligated to give the disclosures of information. The only thing is that the director at the time of his appointment and thereafter on a yearly basis where he was supposed to give the disclosures, he might not be serious about that, or he is not aware of the seriousness of the disclosures what he has to make. So it is the responsibility of the compliance officer and the company secretary to sensitize the directors how important the giving the disclosures of information, because based on that, certain corporate actions are being taken, especially in case of related party transactions. The determination of related party depends upon entirely the information disclosed by the director. Suppose tomorrow, if the director is not disclosed the information, God forbids if any whistleblower has blown the whistle, and based on that, if somebody XYZ who is related to the director, he becomes a related party and all, he will be in trouble and he will also put the company in trouble. So it is the responsibility of the company secretary to sensitize the directors periodically And apart from that thing, whatever the information given or disclosures given by the directors, they should not be taken as a gospel truth. Wherever possible, the compliance officer has to cross-check the information furnished by him. So, for example, in case of Reliance, it was a dictum that it is your responsibility, whatever the disclosures are to be given by the directors. So, whatever the information they are given, we used to cross-check that. Say, for example, if directorships are there, suppose there are 10 directorships are there, and we have to cross-check it with the MCS website. And we came to know, okay, suppose some more directorships are there which have not been disclosed. Then he said, I have resigned from the directorship. They have not filed the DIR 12 form. So we used to ensure that the DIR 12 form is filed within no time. We used to take the initiative to talk to the particular company secretary. We used to talk to him like this. So what I'm trying to say here is, as far as disclosures are concerned, don't take it as if it is the responsibility of the director concerned. Not it is his responsibility. But as a person, as a professional, it is your responsibility to ensure that your director is also secured, because you are the friend, philosopher, and guide of the director. I always say that company secretary is the charioteer as far as the directors are concerned. So it is up to you to guide him and then sensitize him wherever it is required. That's how you have to ensure that. Yeah.
To supplement what Sudhakar said on the insider trading, the company secretary job starts right from the time the person is actually inducted, employed in the company, to identify whether he actually falls under the category of insider or not. The moment it falls under the category, then immediately he has to actually bring his notice. There's an insider trading code is applicable. He has to actually educate you what is the insider trading. He has to provide the copy of the insider trading. He has to take a declaration from him that he will adhere by this, and he has to bring the awareness program. That is what it is actually called for. He very rightly put, it is a compliance issue, not the risk management issue. What are the community risks contemplated under the CSR regulation? Kindly elaborate on this.
Can I give it? Huh?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
I will just take it not relating to just one section 135. Okay. Because anything that companies social responsibility, corporate social responsibility, it's a larger domain. So maybe it will fall into two categories. One is potential damage a company's operation can cause to society or environment. Okay. Could be human rights violation, environmental damage, community impact, product safety, corruption, unethical practice. Could be. But when it comes to internal or business risk with respect to CSR management, could be reputational risk. That means you are maybe greenwashing or window dressing what you are actually doing, and as compared to what the public's this thing is about. Lack of transparency or accountability could be one. And financial and legal risk is fraudulent practice. Misuses of CSR funds, financial misrepresentation, procurement, diversion of funds, tax evasion or avoidance could be one, and regulatory non-compliance, which is what comes under the this thing. And when it comes to operational and implementation risk, could be again, you don't have a proper monitoring or governance. The measuring impacts are not so clear, poor stakeholder engagement, or like we always say, if the culture is misaligned in an organization, nothing can be done. So the risk, I look at it corporate social responsibility as a wider subject and not only just on this thing. I leave it to Sudhakar Sahab and Bala Sahab to add if they are in variance with.
No, you said
Yeah, I
it
think I
nicely.
agree with you.
Yeah. How are the environmental risks different from the climate-related risk?
I will take this. I just want, because I was telling that Percy, so environment risk is different, I agree, but they are interconnected. How environment risk is a broader category that includes risk from pollution, whatever, land use, while climate risk is a specific subset of environmental risk which comes from climate change. And within climate change, it could be relating to physical risk of climate risk or transition risk of time. So it is interconnected, but also there is a clear difference. One is a subset of the other. I would put it that way in a broader perspective.
Can there be a disclaimer for the CA for ESG report?
I think from what I read, because I support a lot on an ESG this thing, what it says is the CAs are involved in ESG assurance probably and do issue report with disclaimers or modified. But but as long as it is only with respect to that they encounter scope limitation or feel information is incomplete or unreliable. Okay. So the even the disclaimer of opinion probably does not exempt the auditors from their statutory obligation or professional standards or diligence or code. So my view on that is it is only this thing. Sudhakarji can probably expand it on that.
According to me, that if you see the Paro report also, there is a covering this thing is there, and even secretarial audit report is also there is an annexure to that, where it is clearly said that the report is based on the information and furnished before us and explanations given to us. That is not a disclaimer. That is the basis on which that audit report has been given. Same is the case here also, when you are giving an assurance. At point of time, suppose that okay, by this assurance is subject to certain things, that doesn't mean they're all disclaimers. Disclaimer is an entirely different thing. You cannot use the word disclaimer in an audit report or in an assurance report. Okay.
Somebody has put here, actually, I think there is a case of the NSE and BSE. There cannot be a loss of time, even a single minute, due to the cyber attack during the trading hours. So it is actually a zero downtime.
No, it is not only in NSC and BSC. There are several things are like that. Say, for example, ATC is there, air traffic control. Okay. So hospitals are there. There are several things like that, where you have that, where completely you are depending upon the technology. So definitely all these things used to have a disaster management plan. And this disaster management or disaster recovery management things are okay. They are the same mirror copies there at some other place. And God forbids if anything happens within fraction of a minute, that other things will take over from you. In fact, same is the case with NSC and BSc sites. In fact, in one of the forums recently, NSC MD Mr. Ashish Chauhan has mentioned about the disaster recovery management as far as NSC is concerned. What they do is that this is what's called as risk mitigation thing. Say, for example, where is the guarantee that the DRM also is working that? Say, for example, when the original things got failed, disaster recovery thing has to immediately take over. Suppose if it doesn't take over, then what will happen? So it needs to be periodically examined that it is in operation. So for that, what he said was on some holidays or Saturdays, something like that, and all, they do a kind of a real online trading as if it is a real one. That is how they test that this thing. Say, for example, in case of Reliance, okay, that whatever we used to have the entire secretarial data is with Carvi, right? And because they are our registrar and transfer agents, but we used to have a disaster recovery thing at Mumbai. God forbids if it collapses here for whatever the reasons it is, if the data got corrupted, it is going to be a huge problem for us. And same is the case with depositories. Why about stock exchange only? Same is the case with depositories. So every organization, whichever is, depending upon the technology for this kind of data management is concerned at all, every organization will certainly have a disaster recovery, what's called as an option. That is called as risk mitigation measures. But by merely setting up that is not sufficient. That needs to be periodically checked also that the desired objective it will be serving when the need arises. That is very important.
Sudhakar has rightly said, I recall about 20 years back when the computer had come, everybody has gone on the online. The entire supply chain system, which has gone the online, everything was happening. The one of the things which was interested to me, because the factory was situated around 25 kilometers away from the main city. I was actually the entry point of the main city in the heart of the city. So what they used to do, the evening, they used to take the backup. The backup used to be in sort of a, the roll tape type of the roll those days. And he used to get that. I had to bring it, put it in the locker very safely, keep it with me. So that if anything goes wrong, that we should be able to recover it. The maximum loss will be only that during a part of the hours or something like that, whatever happened that particular day. Otherwise, we have the backup for till yesterday. This is what it has actually happened. In one such time, we had a great failure. So that time, our loss was only 1 hour. People could be able to make it. We'll have to retrieve from the backup. As rightly said, the disaster management system should be in place, actually, really speaking. Yeah. The two cases we talked about, is saying, if the management is corrupt, risk management committee hands are tied unless the independent directors are aggressive. I think Sudhakar said it earlier on this. I will not make any comment. See, Sudhakar has put a finger on the fraud property. Yeah, that also is their case study. Presentation extraordinary, excellent, good. Okay. How to convert the risk into the financial figures for the evaluation of the RMC?
So, like I said, these days, what they do, they create heat maps, scenarios, and when, let's say, let's take an example. So, because the market is tough, the gross margin will go down in by 2%. Could be a this thing. So, what is the likelihood that the likelihood could be high, and what could be the impact? Let's say if a particular business is doing 100 crores and it has got a margin, gross margin of say 50%. That means you are clearly saying that here 2% could be impact in the coming year if this particular risk happens. Okay. Similarly, you take an example. So you can convert it into financial figure simply, so that's not similarly what we call it concentration map. Let's say I'm supplying 30% of my this thing to SR oil, and SR oil had issues at that particular point of time. That means my receivable is going to be at risk. So whatever the financial figures of budget that has been given or the estimates for the future has been given could have an impact, and the converting them is always based on that year's whatever budget or what estimate we have told the public or within the company. It need not be a public company also. So the conversion is related to what is the key result indicator, and it can be easily converted into financial figure.
My query is actually who owns the top risk and is actually accountable for results and to whom they report.
I think.
Sorry,
No, you take it, you take it, sir.
See, it is always the responsibility, the primary responsibility of the HOD concerned about as far as that risk is concerned. Say, for example, if I am a company secretary and as far as the compliance risk is concerned, I am the person who has to take the ownership for that. And I need to identify that risk, whatever the other elements are there. I need to measure it. I have to find the mitigation measures. And even I may have to report to the RMC periodically. RMC is the one which is going to set up the policy decisions. They are not going to take the implementations and all. So, as far as the accountability and responsibility is concerned, it is the HOD who is has to take the ownership for the respective risks of their departments. And overall, of course, it is to be escalated to the board. God forbids if anything happens, board or the risk management committee cannot say that, look, I am not responsible for this. Whether they like it or not, ultimate responsibility is of the board only, of the directors only. So that is the only reason they have to ensure proper supervision of the management. And management is concerned, it is in execution. What RMC has to do is, if whenever the RMC meetings takes place, it needs to probe the things are in place, the things are in order. Maybe, say, for example, in case of our Reliance, I will give an example to you. The audit committee, what it used to do is, once in a while, it used to call the direct taxation head, indirect taxation head, legal head, and they used to understand from them about the contingent liabilities, what are reporting in the financial statements. Technically, it is concerned, you don't need to do that. Technically, you are concerned with the overall financial statements. But what does that mean by? You have to take the ownership. When you take the ownership for every contingent liability, what are likely that contingent liability may convert into a liability? That also is the responsibility of the audit committee. Same is the case with the risk management also. When you simply say that these are all the risks which we have identified. Say, for example, when there is a change in the laws are there. And say, for example, Regulation 23, constantly it is, contestantly, constantly it is getting changed over a period of time. If I am in the risk management committee, I will ask the company secretary that, look, it is becoming so complex day by day. What sort of, what's called measures you have taken to ensure compliances with Regulation 23? Please explain to me. That is how it is to be done. So RMCs when you say that they have to identify the risk, they have to identify the risk mitigation measures, this is how the RMC meeting has to take place, number one. Number two, there are overlapping functions between the committees, especially in case of RMC and audit committee, though you cannot make into one committee as such, but overlappings are certainly there. That's why I always suggest that once in a while, audit committee members have to join the RMC as invitees and observe the proceedings there and all, and vice versa. RMC members have to join the audit committee meetings also. Because if you want to identify the risk, you have to have the overall business understanding. Every component of the business, you need to understand that. Then only you will be able to do that. Otherwise, you are only an ornamental figure as far as RMC is concerned. Yeah.
So just to
Still,
add, I will just add to that what he said. See, it's a shared responsibility, including the shareholders, I would say, because they do approve at times certain thing, board, audit committee, senior management. But what really is about the lines of defense for both responsibility and accountability. So for the senior management, the lines of business, what management control or internal control measures have been done. Then the other line is internal audit. Internal audit could be a this thing to senior management and the board, and about the assurance from the regulator, from the external audit and things like that. So the accountability or the responsibility moves also from it's a shared responsibility from everybody has to do their work. And in fact, even to the risk management committee, it is clearly written who is the owner of doing this particular mitigation. It's important to share this in whenever there is an action plan. Who's the owner? What is the situation? What they have done? So it's a shared responsibility as
yeah, correct. As you rightly said in the beginning, to identify who's the risk owner. That is what it is important. Okay. Still, the risk management is a judgment based, is it? Somebody is asking a question.
Yes, I saw a very nice question, I should say, from that. Yes, risk management and risk management is about quality of decision making being better. That is so risk assessment and decision making is a judgment based process, but it blends both the analysis and human expertise. So in spite of whatever happens with the human expertise is still this thing. So since it is reviewed, that is why it is important to measure and monitor. What you decided at one point of time could have changed when you measured, and so it could the judgment becomes again very. So the key reason is that judgment is very critical, and this judgment comes out of expertise, past trends, past this thing, industrial experience in that domain, I would say.
Somebody is given information about the CASO. CASO published the ERM integrating the strategy and the performance in 2007. There are actually 100 components and also 20 risk management principles is the information which is given. I think it is not advisable to bring the financial and accounting work with the risk monitoring work and audit committee. Both are different function to the corporate governance. In fact, Sudhakar explained this very well, the overlapping things and all we had. Next is appreciation, excellent presentation, valuable input from the member. One of the very important session indeed. RMC, we often recognize the trick. Very good. Thanks. Well clarified. Very informative. I have, okay. Again, it's thank you very much, madam. I have been very good. Yeah, that's all I think. We are done with all the questions. Any hand is risen, we can check it up.
No hand is raised.
No hand is risen. I think already we are 120. I think it's a time for us to close actually. In fact, really speaking, I must appreciate Nine for the very, very excellent visual presentation. As Sudhakar puts it initially, the first two slides, what she has actually not only presented, she has gone with the presentation and elaborated with the examples, etc. is very, very informative and illustrative. I must appreciate your excellent effort, Nine. My appreciation, great appreciation to you. And I must also acknowledge the receipt, the excellent sharing from Mallikarjun, who is actually having a vast experience in globally, and he has brought out many, many important issues of the risk management area. It's very nice actually. Sudhagar, I will not say anything separately. He's always there, our stalwart. The last word to Dipti.
Yeah, thanks.
No,
Thanks, Mr. Malik. Thanks a lot for your
thank you,
time.
thank you. I just, it's all over, but managing risk is about anticipating uncertainty, correct? And, it's ensuring organization not just to be protected, but to position to thrive. That is very important. That as long as people understand this risk management makes you a position to thrive, sustain, be best in class. It's not about protection. It is about value creation and resilience. It's a great topic, I should say. Thank you to my Mehta and Mehta, Deepthi, Professor Sir, Sudhakar ji, Nayan had done a wonderful job. All the participants who patiently listened in spite of the lunchtime, thank you so much and wonderful. I will continue to be on Saturday, 11 o'clock.
You
From
are
the other
always
side.
there on Saturday. Always you are there, I know. You are a very active participant.
We all are there 11 to 1:30, not
Yeah.
11, before 11.
Yeah.
So before you conclude, Deepti, that the participants may take a note that next week we are going to have the nomination and remuneration committee and the intricacies and niceties of that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sudhagar, when you said actually in the personal life also we have got a risk. Let me also tell you at this particular age, I also visualize what is the risk is going to happen if I'm no longer there in the world for my daughter. Having regard to that, I have taken all the mitigation efforts, right from the writing of the will and right from nominating the places, transferring the property, that etc. and all this thing. The moment everything is there, she will not have any problem. So we'll have to actually anticipate, we'll have to work, we'll have to do it. I just thought of sharing with you when it comes to the personal life risk. Thank you.
Yo.
Have a
Thanks,
good day.
everyone.
Thanks a lot to everybody.
Yeah, thanks, everyone. Thanks for your
Thank you,
participation.
Nayan. Thank you, Deepthi.
Thanks,
Take care.
Nayan, for this.
Say hello to Atul ji, then,
Thank
thanks,
you.
Professor Sir.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks. See you next week. Bye.